Clause 3.4 provides that until the EOR issues the defect certificate, so any time before defect certificate, if the EOR gives the contractor a written instruction in relation to the works, the contractor must implement the instruction. This can include an instruction changing the works or an instruction imposing or changing restrictions on how the works are to be constructed. Now that's very, very, very common, as you all know. So, no magic there. I'll tell you what does go wrong is that nobody makes a claim for it. An EOR makes an instruction. A very good EOR will say, I'm making an instruction and I'm allowing you such and such days or such and such a price adjustment. Mostly they don't. So you're going to get your instruction. The contractor goes, okay, fine, I was working off an instruction, so that's fine, I can proceed. You as the contractor need to get a letter in saying what you need for that instruction. So request an instruction, request your price adjustment, request your extension of time. Whatever you need for that, get your claim in, telling the EOR that that's what you need. Again, if there's a barney to be had, have it at that stage. Don't be trying to argue at final account stage that, well, you gave the instruction, yeah, but how much did it cost? Or how much did it mean extra to the contract? Make sure you agree at that stage. Which then ties in quite nicely with clause 3.5, which is where a contractor is entitled to seek an instruction. So the employer's representative will give the contractor instructions that are necessary for the contractor to construct the works if the contractor asks for them in writing. Such an instruction must be given in reasonable time, taking into account when the contractor asked for it and when the contractor needs it to avoid delay to the works. So again, if for any reason you need an instruction, then you ask for it in writing. Specify the instruction you need, specify if it's going to have any time or cost implications. It must be given in reasonable time. What is reasonable time? Not defined under the contract. You decide. If I'm sorry, my practical examples are useless because I'm a solicitor, not an engineer, but if, for example, your rebar guy was supposed to be there yesterday and hasn't been there and hasn't laid the steel and you're a concrete arriving tomorrow that you're going to pour, it's urgent. You need the instruction straight away. So you need to say, I need an instruction today. If it's something that's like 10 days off and you could just see it coming down the line, fine, say it then. But if the EOR will be able to say, well, you didn't tell me I needed it urgently. You go, well, I had a concrete truck standing there, was it not obvious? No, if it's not on paper, it's up to you to make sure it's on paper so that the EOR knew that you needed it today. Because again, he'll be able to take into account, the contract actually provides that he can take into account when you requested it. So that's kind of a peculiar sentence which I've never quite worked out what it means, because the implications of it are what? So he was entitled not to give it to you? Again, slightly ambiguous, but the way to overcome it is if you simply ask for your instruction when you need it. And obviously it's in order to avoid delay. Again, specify the price adjustment and the time extension you need if required. If you get an oral instruction, you put it on paper. So you say, as noted, you've instructed us to do X, because the EOR will come back fairly quickly if he did not mean it as an instruction. Again, you'll have the barney at that point, but make sure that you put it in writing, because if you put it in writing and he doesn't do anything, then that's an instruction and you can always rely on that instruction. So next then is price and payment in clause 4.2, which is on page 4 of your contract there. There's 3 points in the contract, obviously, or 3 kind of entitlements to payment, if you like. The first is your interim payment, so it'll be specified in the schedule how regular your payments are and the amount you're to get type of thing. So the contractor, when a payment is due, the contractor submits a statement and the EOR provides a certificate within 10 working days with reasons for any difference, if you like, of what he's not certifying. That is a claim situation, because if the EOR is not certifying what you want, or what you think you're due, then again, that's a situation where you need to put in a claim and say, I think I'm entitled to more here, etc., and spark off the written claims procedure. Then obviously, if he does agree with your statement and he issues the certificate, you send your invoice and you'll be paid within the time stated in the schedule. It's 15 days under the standard contract, so that tends to be always the period used as well in the schedule for these contracts. Then you're obviously entitled to payment on substantial completion. And you're entitled at that stage to your percentage of the price stated in the schedule, and as was pointed out earlier, it's always 95%. So the contractor at that stage submits a penultimate statement within 20 days of substantial completion. Again, at that stage, if there's any problem here, you need to make a claim. You need to write that if he's not certifying some substantial completion, or if you think there's any issue with this, then you need to make a claim at this stage as well. That doesn't tend to cause too many problems, ironically enough. The problems are really caused at the next stage, which is a defect certificate. Again, the EOR must issue the defect certificate, and the contractor submits his final statement within 20 working days of the defect certificate. Now, differently to the main contract, the EOR doesn't have to issue a defect certificate under this short form contract. He may issue it, but he doesn't have to issue it if he's not happy that the contractor has done all the works. Contractors don't seem to be aware of that for some reason. So there's all sorts of argy-bargies in relation to this particular clause where people say, well, he had to issue the defect certificate. No, he didn't. So again, you need to make sure that you really actively manage that one. If you think you're entitled to it, or if you think you're entitled to anything, or if you think, I mean, I have several, and that's why I don't want to kind of argue against myself here, but you know, I have several live conciliations over the defect certificate where the contractor is years later saying, but he should have issued it. And I said, but you didn't say anything at the time. Write it. Say you should have issued the defect certificate at this stage, because it becomes a claim. So the next one then is, I suppose, that the big one is clause 4.4, which is your compensation events. Now we'll go through these in detail, if you just bear with me. The compensation event means any of the following. If the EOR gives an instruction that changes the works or constraints in this contract on how the works are to be constructed, to search for defects or their clause under 3.9 and no defect is found, and the search was not required because of a failure by the contractor to comply with this contract, or to suspend work. If you ask for an instruction and you don't get it, you see what I mean then, this ties in, it becomes a compensation event for which you're entitled to make a claim. So it's very important that if you need an instruction, you ask for it, because it really does trigger it. And as I say, it triggers a price adjustment under the contract, so very important. Then 3, other contractors working on the site under clause 2.2 impede the contractor, and this was unforeseeable and not in accordance with this contract. So again, that's another one that causes a lot of problems because, you know, naturally enough, you come after another contractor, as I said earlier, they don't do what they were supposed to do. But contractors seem to operate on this basis of, well, everybody knew that we were under that problem. They don't, not on paper. Write it that you were impeded from it, and therefore need instructions to deal with the amended programme or time frame, if you like. 4, breach of this contract by the employer. 5, the employer instructs the contractor to rectify loss or damage at the employer's risk. 6, the contractor encounters on the site unforeseeable ground conditions or unforeseeable man-made obstructions in the ground. And 7, owners of utility apparatus on the site do not relocate or disconnect their apparatus as stated in this contract when the contractor has complied with their procedures and the procedures in this contract and the failure is unforeseeable. Now the next part of this is extremely important because note your meaning of unforeseeable. Unforeseeable is if an experienced contractor would not have foreseen it at the time of tendering for the works. Don't be shy about saying that something was unforeseeable. If it was unforeseeable, there's many things that were inconceivable when you'll all have better examples than I will on this, right? But there's many things that when you actually tendered for the works, you didn't think there was going to be such and such pipes there or something. They weren't in the surveys, or then you open it up and they are there. That's unforeseeable. So don't be shy about saying that something's unforeseeable. It actually amazes me how shy contractors can be about relying on the fact that it was unforeseeable, because the whole thing about it being an experienced contractor, there seems to be a feeling out there that you should have sort of known about it or something. The time of tendering is the crucial thing. If it was in any way unforeseeable at the time of tender, make a claim, and certainly if in any doubt, make the claim, put in the claim for a compensation event, because if you don't, you lose all entitlement to it, whereas if you do, you at least have some chance of getting it. So as I say, it's one that contractors don't rely on enough, and I don't know why actually, because I think it's fairly obvious, it's a fairly easy thing to prove a lot of the time.